Join us as we venture into the interior of remote Alaska, from the endless boreal forests to the slopes of the epic Alaska Range. Stories of Sasquatch-like creatures abound in some of these desolate and stunning landscapes.
And we see this, or I see this thing first, this huge thing that at first glance, I jokingly say to my wife and nephew, I said, wow, there goes Bigfoot. Well, at that point, I was fully thinking in my mind, it's got to be a hunter or something.
Park Service also, at the time, they would do a wildlife report of the latest sightings since the last report about once a month. And one time on the report, shortly after hunting season, they actually in that report mentioned that hunters had reported a sighting of, they said it was a Sasquatch.
So was it just blood and hair here, or were there actually any bones or any?
It was just blood and hair. Like,
okay.
We walked up, we saw the hair, and deeper inspection. When we got close, we could see like traces of blood and stuff around.
Okay.
Alaska is one of the most dangerous places you can be in. The land will literally swallow you up. You can die of hypothermia, frostbite. Even in the summertime, a weird weather pattern can come in. Even with GPS, I've been, gotten lost at times. You can get disoriented in the mountains, not know where you're going. There's all kinds of trenches you can fall into. Just really inhospitable land, not to mention the bears, very aggressive bears. I've been charged by bears before, attacked by bears, just very dangerous. The moose alone kill more people than bears do and injure more people here in town. They're just very dangerous. They'll stomp on you. But the bears are very vicious. Wolves, people have been attacked by wolves. It is just an inhospitable place. Very difficult place to travel. There is just so much land here. Our population is small, and so much of Alaska is unexplored. So who knows what's out there? There's all kinds of legends, and half of them could be true because it's just unexplored. It's a very wild place. People go missing, people die, they get in accidents. Bears eat people, literally eat them here. It's a very wild, wild place.
Well, the interesting thing about Bigfoot in Alaska is there seems to be a either-or kind of situation where you talk to people and they either absolutely do not believe and it's not a real thing, or they have had an encounter or know someone who has. There doesn't really seem to be a lot of in-between.
There's a lot of space up here. It's just open areas. People have never been everywhere. So around here you can see how they could do it because you just can't see anything through these. I mean, it's just, they could totally stay hidden. Why not? It's not that crazy to think there would be some kind of a primate or some kind of an ancient hominid that has survived and is thriving around, certain areas. So Alaska would seem like a logical choice because they stay hidden. They could easily stay hidden.
You see a lot of people that have had encounters in remote areas, away from cities, away from municipal areas, and that's one of the luxuries that Sasquatch has up here is just if it doesn't want to be around people, it certainly doesn't have to be. There's not a lot of areas where you would have like choke points, maybe in between two cities or a couple of large bodies of water and some towns. You've definitely got a lot of room to just be away from people if you want to be. And you see the majority of encounters that I've heard about and had reported to me seem to occur just out in the bush, out away from civilization. I have a lot of people tell me, like, oh, you're so lucky to be up there, to be able to research up there and look for Bigfoot up there. And honestly, I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, because again, to beat the dead horse, it's so massive up here. It's just so much area to cover. And I'll get reports from people, hey, I had a sighting at this area, you want to come investigate? And it's 10 hours away from my house, and I'm like, that's a big commitment to make, to drive and just, look at a place where something crossed the road if there's no tracks or anything. So, yeah, it's a challenge. I don't think there's too many places in the lower 48 that can compare.
If you are going to go exploring in Alaska, at the very least, you need bear spray. I would suggest a firearm, because many times bear spray does not work and you need a firearm to protect yourself. You need a way to contact people, so shortwave radio or like an inReach satellite communication system. First aid kit, you have to have the right gear to keep yourself dry and warm. That's probably the most important thing. If you're not warm and keeping your feet from getting wet, you can die very quickly out here, even in the middle of summer. So you have to be prepared with the right clothing, the right gear, boots, rain gear, survival equipment.
The last Bigfoot Beyond the Trail film, called the Alaska Bigfoot Highway, documented my journey driving up the world-famous Alaska Highway from the lower 48 United States all the way up to Alaska itself. The end destination of that journey was the city of Fairbanks, in order to attend the Boreal Bigfoot Expo, a 2-day event held about all things Sasquatch in the 49th state, while giving me a chance to reconnect with friends and colleagues like Larry Beans Baxter, Rob Roy Menzies, Dr. Jeff Meldrum, and others. It also gave me a chance to speak with quite a few Alaskans who have had Sasquatch sightings and experiences. This is probably my favorite part of any Bigfoot conference, regardless of location. Connecting with locals who can share their experiences and knowledge of these areas is very much the highlight of these kinds of events. With interior Alaska being such an insanely large and remote area, having some tips on where to head definitely helped steer us in the right direction. Otherwise, you're just looking at a giant, mostly blank space on a map, with potential habitat abounding. There were a few locations that we did visit as a direct consequence of knowledge gained from the Boreal Bigfoot Expo, whether from the locals I spoke with or from researchers like Larry Beans Baxter. Given the city of Fairbanks' central location within Alaska, it was an ideal jumping off point to other areas of the interior of Alaska we could visit. The first place we ventured to was about 3 hours outside of Fairbanks, on the road to a place called Manhandle Hot Springs. It was first brought to my attention by Beans, who had been wanting to visit the location for a while. He had previously received a sighting report from somebody driving through this area of interior Alaska.
So the witness contacted me, told me about the roadside crossing he had there near Manhandle Hot Springs. He seemed like a good, credible witness. He was wanted to use a pseudonym and remain anonymous, which was fine. A lot of witnesses do.
The following audio is from an interview Beans conducted with this witness.
We're from interior Alaska, and we had gone out to Manhandle Hot Springs. And Manhandle Hot Springs is a small community, just over 100 people, 156 miles from Fairbanks. So it's a pretty remote little place out there. So anyways, we were out in Manhandle and we were heading back to Fairbanks. And this was, again, maybe third week in July or something. So of course, tons of midnight sun, and it was a pretty hot day, probably 75 degrees or so. And we were playing a game, driving back, trying to just stay awake, be entertained on the long drive back. So we were all kind of alert, paying attention. And we were in between Manly and Fairbanks. We come over this crest, come over this like hill, and we see right in the middle of the road something. And this is pretty far out, probably at least 300 feet in front of us. And we see this, or I see this thing first, this huge thing that at first glance, I jokingly say to my wife and nephew, I said, wow, there goes Bigfoot. Well, at that point, I was fully thinking in my mind that it's got to be a hunter or something. You know, I didn't even at all really think. But yet, the way it was hunched and walking, that's why I jokingly at first said, there goes Bigfoot, even though I was thinking it was a hunter. And so they look up right away, and they see it with me. Now, when I saw it first, it was probably right in the middle of the road. And it was walking at a pretty brisk pace. And by the time they'd looked up, it was had already gotten to the edge of the road and was starting to walk down into the, off, on the side of the road into the woods. And so I probably saw it for a total of maybe 7 to 10 seconds. They probably both saw it for about 4 or 5 seconds. And this thing was probably at least 7 foot. And it looked pretty skinny, and it was hunched a little bit forward, walking with its arms kind of swinging, and its arms looked pretty abnormally long. And when we saw this thing again, after I had jokingly said there was Bigfoot, and then thinking, man, this has got to be a hunter or something. But at that point, I sped up because it was, like I said, a couple hundred feet in front of us, and I wanted to get a better look. But it didn't have any color disfiguration, like, whereas a human would have different colors on their gloves or hands or feet or anything. It was completely black or very dark brown. We get up there, and it had already gotten into the woods, and we were thinking, man, what the heck was that? It has to be, there has to be an explanation. It's got to be a hunter, a really tall hunter or something. But we look around, there's no driveways, no cars, no trails, nothing, no hint of people or anything. And again, we're miles and miles away from any kind of village or civilization. We just started freaking out at that point. We're like, what was that?
His sighting, it's typical of your roadside crossing that walks across the road. You think maybe it's a man or a person, but then you start to realize, like, I'm in the middle of nowhere, there's nobody here. And then, like, well, why was it all one uniform color? Why wasn't there, different colored hands or feet or whatever, or head? I did have another indication there was activity in the area. Stephen Major had come up here for an expo a couple of years ago and was talking to the cab driver that was taking him to the airport, mentioned he was here for the expo. The cab driver said, hey, my family's from Minto, and there's all kinds of crazy Bigfoot stuff going on there, which is just a few miles away from where we were in Manhandle Hot Springs. So, you have those kind of, not necessarily collaborating, but compounding reports of activity in the same area. So I thought it was definitely worth going out there and checking out.
While at the expo, I got a chance to meet with the eyewitness. He seemed credible in person in my estimation, not interested much in the Bigfoot topic previously. Given this information, we decided it warranted a visit to the area. Alright, so we're leaving Fairbanks now, heading north and then west towards more of the geographical center of Alaska, a very remote area near Manhandle Hot Springs, about a 3-hour drive. Should be just cool to see the kind of area around there and check the whole place out. So we're going to convoy out there with Beans. Alright, we're gassed up and ready to go. You guys ready for this?
I'm excited. Yeah, we've had some reports coming out of there, and really good roadside crossing, and some activity around the Minto area, and we're going to be camping right in that area. And I've never been up this far and stayed here. I've been through here, so I'm really excited to see what happens, if we're going to get any activity. We're going to be doing some real rustic camping, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it should be awesome. Well, let's hit the road then.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it. You ready, bro?
Ready. there?
There's Sasquatch on there, yeah. There we go. Nice and prominent, huh? Alright, well, we're convoying out. We got Beans in front of us in his truck. Just doing another quick radio check.
Yeah, Mark. I can hear you loud and clear.
Alrighty. Okay, so now we've got about, I think, another hour until we're out to this place, but it's really starting to get pretty desolate out here. Not a lot. Mountains have become sort of rolling hills. It reminds me of driving through parts of northern Maine. Middle of nowhere, just these dirt roads, just rolling kind of hills, boreal looking forests. This could probably be anywhere in northern Maine, northern parts of Canada. This doesn't have any really dramatic mountains here like you would see in maybe other parts of Alaska further south from here. I don't know, maybe even further north. I don't know the terrain, but it really just, it reminds me of places I feel like I've been to these kinds of areas. Mile 124, very close to the sighting location, and just about to be a big rainstorm just as we're about to get here. Just our luck. You can drive up to it closer.
Oh, something hang up in the tree over there.
Really? All right, getting out too. Oh yeah, what is that?
Bucket or something.
I think it's a bait bucket? Not really a lot here.
No, it's just super thick though. I mean, and I was looking as we were coming down the road, and I thought maybe I could find a game trail or something.
Yeah.
And it's all pretty much just like this. There's not really any
A lot of taller trees
or,
here.
Yeah.
I mean, these are decently tall. You could see how something could hide in. And this side's more brushy compared to even just that side, but this is, so he basically said it happened between 125 and 126.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah, it was just a road crossing. He said it was kind of lanky. Kind of reminded him a little bit maybe of like Chewbacca from Star Wars. And initially, like a lot of witnesses thought it was a person, but then it kind of dawned on him, like, look where I'm at. There's no cars, you know, nobody's parked on the side of the road here, and kind of realized probably what it was.
Yeah.
I don't understand. So explain to me how they keep the mosquitoes off of them, because that's what I want to do.
Yeah. How do the bears and the moose do it? I mean, they just deal with it.
I guess. I don't know.
Jeez. Well, we're getting hit with a little bit of rain, but yeah, I mean, I talked to the guy too, and what he described was what he thought was really weird was the all black. And he said, you know, no different skin tone or anything like that. So what a person would be doing wearing black ninja outfit, you know, whatever it is. But
we'll drive the mile.
Yeah.
And
see if there's maybe any other trails in or anything.
If I see any trails, and
yeah. You want to lead the way?
Sure.
Alrighty. Alright, well, we just loaded up and we're going to check out this area out here. Old logging road of some kind, or just an old road. Everybody's equipped, armed. We got all our bug stuff, although, I mean, you've got the mask off. Doesn't seem so bad now.
Not right now.
But
it was
you never
needed.
know. Okay. Pretty sweet looking area. Yeah, look at all this.
Oh wow. These look like moose tracks.
Yeah, look at that. Oh yeah, look. Oh, that's perfect.
Oh, there's.
So we are now in the Boreal Forest, huh?
This is it.
This is basically the largest type of forest on Earth. I mean, between all the land in Canada, Alaska, Russia.
Yep, we're in the Boreal Belt.
The so-called Boreal Belt, also known simply as the Boreal Forest or the taiga, is one of the largest biomes on planet Earth, comprising over 6 million square miles and 11.5% of the Earth's landmass. It stretches across much of the far northern hemisphere of the world, from parts of northern Europe such as Scandinavia, crossing most of Russia and into parts of northern Asia, and into most of Alaska and across the entirety of Canada, even stretching into parts of the northeastern United States. The Boreal Forest habitat is comprised mostly of coniferous trees such as spruce, pine, and larch.
Like, almost looks like cat food, like long little pellets. I'll have to do some research and see what that is.
Wow. Pretty disgusting. I don't even know if the camera does this any justice. That's how many are on Beans' hat right now.
What's your spray with bug spray, by the way?
Yeah. Bug spray doesn't work on the Alaskan state bird. Just gonna stand here, and I don't know if the camera will pick any of this up. The amount of mosquitoes right now is just pretty obscene.
They like drowned in my hat.
So many dead mosquitoes on his hat. You hear that, Luca?
What?
Oh, I thought I heard something move up there.
Nope.
Got one on your face.
I got a hood on, so I can't hear as well.
Okay. I thought I heard a snap back over there, though. Just keep your eyes peeled. You wanna go this way? Yeah, I just don't know if something lived here. I mean, what a miserable existence. Look at that.
That's interesting looking impression.
See if there's anything else like that up here. No, it's just kind of pretty generic up here. So we're not that far from the road, huh? Well, out here I guess it's probably good to stay closer. And we could just go off into one of these directions and disappear forever out here very easily.
Oh, you could
People do.
You could walk that direction until you hit the Arctic Ocean. I mean, you would probably die first.
Yeah, right. But take you a heck of a long time.
There's not much between here and the Arctic Ocean, but this.
It's unending. But yeah, I didn't really find a whole lot out there. Really difficult conditions. We're just kind of gonna hang out here. Here's Alaska for you. 11:05 right now. Sun is still shining. Got sun on a little hill over there. 11 p.m. at night.
So this little piggy put his tent together with the flap closed, and this little piggy did not. And what happened?
I don't know. I just have more than a bit of a colony in here. I mean, there's just Mosquito City. I mean, you can't even see. I don't even think the camera can catch how many are in here. The following day, we tried our best to explore some of the area around camp and by the road. But with conditions being less than desirable, we mostly ended up hanging around camp, eagerly awaiting our departure from the area the following morning. Well, wasn't very successful here. We're gonna call it and get out of here. Just way too many bugs. Not really one to complain, but they're very incessant. So we're wrapping up here. Beans, what do you think?
Well, I think this area has a lot of potential. I just think we're probably here at the wrong time of year.
Yeah.
The roadside crossing that kind of brought this area to my attention happened in September. That's probably the time to be here. The bugs are just swarming. The mosquitoes are bad.
Yeah.
You can see we're all wearing mosquito nets. Poor Alex, he got bit all up. He's all scratching and itching. But yeah, I think this area does have potential. Unfortunately, I mean, it's so far away from me. It's not like I can just hop up here and stay for a weekend.
Right.
And this, you know, I came up here for the Expo. This was an opportunity for me to get up here, and I had to check it out. But yeah, it's a promising area. It's just you know, that, and it's so large. You know.
Yeah.
There's nothing in either direction of us, and you know, we could be here at this area, and there could be a ton of Bigfoot like 2 valleys over, and we'd never know it. So.
Yeah.
I think I'll keep concentrating on the Kenai Peninsula like I do, and keep an ear open for any reports coming out of this area, but it's not easily accessible for me. So
Alaska's huge.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest states. It is the biggest state.
Biggest state, but it was still fun. It was still an adventure, and you know, now onwards to other locations and stuff. So
yeah, hopefully less buggy locations.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, there you have it. While out there, we got a small taste of what the vastness of interior Alaska is like. This area was luckily connected to the very limited road system in Alaska, whereas most places aren't and can only be reached via airplane or boat through rivers and bodies of water. This leaves small communities, including many indigenous villages, in very remote areas that are not easily accessible. The vast expanses of interior Alaska have inspired many strange stories aside from those of a Boreal Sasquatch type creature. Stories of hairy giants far larger than your typical Bigfoot roaming the barren northern landscapes, as well as those of little people, a common folklore motif throughout human history. There are rumors of thought-to-be extinct animals like woolly mammoths still grazing the Alaskan tundra. Some of these stories are more far-fetched than others. I, for one, could see how creatures like woolly mammoths could have possibly survived in parts of Alaska for far longer than they were supposed to have. One type of story that seems to persist across Alaska, but especially in the interior, is that of UFOs and strange objects in the skies. With a large presence that the US military has maintained in Alaska since before its statehood, that perhaps can explain some of these stories. It's no surprise that Alaska is still considered to be a hotspot for UFO sightings. Some of you will recall the news from February of this year of a mysterious object allegedly shot down by the Air Force over Alaska during the Chinese spy balloon incident. But UFO stories in Alaska seem to predate the modern UFO topic, as well as aircraft and balloons altogether. Chuk told me of one particularly interesting story I felt was worth sharing, even if not directly related to the Bigfoot topic.
My grandmother is not alive anymore. She was a teenager when she translated the Kobuk River people for the University of Alaska Press. Now, this book was a series of oral legends, so this was legends that have been passed down generation to generation. I remember as a kid reading one of them in particular because somewhere I have a copy of this book, and there is a story called the Eyeshade People. Now, the Eyeshade People are called Eyeshade People because they were these curious beings that had rock, or they called it rock in the story because they hadn't come in contact with metal at that time, but they wore eye shades, similar to the Inupiaq people with their sunshades, but they were these rock eye shades. So the story of the Eyeshade People happens on the Kobuk River near the village of Shungak. Someday I want to travel to this place because the story describes it near the village of Shungak by a mountain that has a crack in it. There was a glowing rock that made the sound of cranes when it flew. It was round, and there's this hunter, and the rock abducts his wife. So he becomes very angry. He uses some traditional powers and consults with some wise women that live under a lake. They give him a feather that allows him to float up to this flying rock. There's a door in the rock. He is able to enter it. When he goes in, he flies into a rage because he sees these beds. There are small beings. They all have the rock eye shades. And then there's one big massive being, a giant, who also has an eye shade. They're all asleep, and he sees his wife naked on a table, and he goes into a rage. He has this sword made of slate rock, and he beheads all of these alien creatures. After he does that, he jumps out of the rock with his wife holding the feather, floats to the ground, and this is what fascinates me because this is an oral tradition. It's hundreds of years old. Before the Europeans made contact, you know, people didn't know about lasers. They described a laser weapon or a particle beam. As he was jumping down, the glowing rock made a strange sound, and something shot out from it and cut off part of his parka. Once he reached the ground, the old women told him that he would be safe once he reached the tracks of the village in the snow. So they ran and ran, but the rock came back to life, started spinning and whirling, making the sounds of a crane, followed them, shooting at them. But once he made to the tracks of the village, the rock stopped. They went into their hut because people lived in kind of these dome huts that were dug out, and the rock started making more noises, spinning. It dove into the ground, burrowed underneath his house, and then came up, and it shapeshifted. The rock or metal became flat, and for the rest of their days they had a hut with a completely smooth, flat metal floor, and it was like the machine just shut off and became their floor. And so that's an ancient story, and it just boggles my mind because it's, you know, the giant reminds me of the Bigfoot stories. The little people in the floating, you know, metal sphere remind me of alien abduction stories. And he was able to, you know, use his anger to defeat them and kill these creatures and save his wife. But just a wild, wild story, and it's not typically a story you would hear in oral tradition because it describes technology.
So, and you said your grandmother helped translate this?
As a teenager, yes. So it was a very old story, and it was Kobuk River people, all pre-contact stories, all oral traditions. So really amazing.
This story clearly has a very folkloric nature, but to the Kobuk River people, it carried some significance. Ancient people often prescribed many mystical qualities to the things they observed in nature. But something like this story seemed a little different than most Native American stories I've heard. We're likely to never find out the answer, but if we as modern humans are seeing UFOs nowadays, why wouldn't people in the past see them to some degree as well? Moving Moving back to the Bigfoot subject, something I've been wanting to do more with this series is following up on topics covered in previous expeditions and films over the years. With how much I've focused on Alaska over the last year, there are a few follow-ups in this episode to topics covered in previous works. With that being said, after those few days at Manhandle Hot Springs, while back in Fairbanks, from there we headed to an area of interior Alaska that we'd previously explored last year. At over 6 million acres, Denali National Park is known around the world. It is famous, of course, for being the home of North America's tallest mountain, known as Denali or Mount McKinley, at a stunning 20,310 feet. When we visited the area around the national park last year, we interviewed eyewitnesses and researchers alike for various small town monsters films which have since come out, such as The Last Frontier, Land of the Missing, as well as my own Beyond the Trail Searching for the Alaskan Sasquatch film. I'd been wanting to return to this area once again, in order to follow up on some old threads with new leads. Healy, Alaska lies right outside of Denali National Park. The infamous Stampede Trail starts at the end of town and drifts into the endless Alaskan wilderness. This trail has been immortalized by the story of Chris McCandless of Into the Wild fame, who was last seen alive on the Stampede Trail. But the Stampede Trail itself has somewhat of an unusual history. Last year in our video, I read an official National Park Service report that described the vandalization of some remote cabins in 1992, during the same time period McCandless was living in the surrounding wilderness.
A Park Service employee hiked overland from the park road at the Teklanika, and he hiked into the cabins that are there, and there's a few cabins. There's a Park Service cabin just inside the wilderness boundary, and then there's three cabins just outside of the Park Service boundary on private land. He found the Park Service cabin and one of the private cabins extensively damaged. Windows broken out. In the case of the Park Service cabin, the roof was dented, which is peculiar. The other private cabin, the heavy wood stove had been carried out of the cabin and deposited outside, and a carpet had been dragged out of the cabin. Foodstuffs, as I recall, were not missing. The places were trashed. It was very upsetting to people. The denting of the roof was chalked up to somebody grabbing a splitting maul and hitting it. I've been to that cabin. I've slept in that cabin. The roof eaves are fairly high. They're about 7 feet up. It just seems odd that a vandal would go after the roof. There were a whole lot of other things to vandalize in that cabin, so it seems odd. So McCandless was blamed for this. You know, he was kind of an Into the Wild guy, and they thought that, well, of course, he had wandered upstream and found these cabins, and for some reason vandalized them, even though he was living in a bus, rather than just moving into one of the cabins where he'd be more comfortable. Also, the cabins had food in them. If McCandless had vandalized the cabins earlier in the summer, it seems a little odd that he would have then gone back to his bus and starved to death. That doesn't make sense to me. But people who, at least one family that owns one of those cabins, they blamed McCandless for it. I don't really buy it. The vandalism too seemed random enough. McCandless, you know, he was weak. To carry a wood stove out of a cabin that probably weighed 250 pounds or so, it just doesn't click for me. And pulling the rug out? Why would he do that? It was pretty messed up when they got to the rug. It was covered with mold. So I've always just thought that didn't make sense. It seems to me more likely that it was vandalized by one of our friends, but I don't know. It's just a suspicion. Park Service also had, at the time, they would do a wildlife report of the latest sightings since the last report about once a month. And one time on the report, shortly after hunting season, they actually in that report mentioned that hunters had reported a sighting of, they said it was a Sasquatch, but described it as half pig, half bear, half Sasquatch or something like that. They did it very tongue-in-cheek, but I think they actually did get that report, and that would have been out the Stampede Trail. That's where they said it was. My guess is close to the Technique out there. There's good moose hunting grounds out there, and I think a group was harassed by a Sasquatch out there. That was much more recent, 2015 or so.
When I first visited the Stampede Trail area last year, it was covered with too much snow for us to even attempt to make it very far into the bush. Returning to the area this time around would prove to be different, with full-on summer conditions. There was also another reason for the visit. A story I was told at the Boreal Bigfoot Expo, which we decided to follow up on while here in Healy. We would meet with the man who told us the story on location, along with Norm accompanying us as well.
All right, this is basically the end of Stampede Road, right, Norm?
Yep, the end of the maintained part.
And so, what is it, 17 miles down from this location is where the bus was?
More like 20, 25.
25, oh wow.
Somewhere in there. It's quite a ways.
Right, so that is quite a distance. And we're obviously here, as I mentioned earlier, we met up with John. Should I call you John, or do you want to use like a code name?
John.
John, okay, sounds good. Code name John, yeah.
Code name John.
We're here, John had something interesting happen out here, and we'll let him tell his story kind of when we get to the spot, of course. But yeah, just for my own memory, just talking about being out here last year and how different it was. A little over a year ago, just so snowy. There's that funny sequence where Eli and I tried to go follow some moose tracks, and we're basically in almost waist deep snow. that wasn't too fun. Everyone kept yelling at us, "Get some snowshoes." I did not. We did not expect that. You know, Rob Roy did not have any snowshoes in his camper van, so I'm blaming Rob Roy for this one. Just kidding. But yeah. So yeah, could you just run us through kind of what exactly happened out here? Just kind of the full story. You know, what you guys were doing, all that sort of stuff.
So we came out here to see the alpenglow on the mountains out there, and we're just chilling, partying, listening to music, and then the dogs are just running around, and one of them comes back with a caribou foot in its mouth. We were standing just over there, and I'm like, I'm gonna go find this thing, because why not? And I walk over here to where, because the easiest way to get into the brush was from right here. So then I walk in here and I go out there, and that's where I found the footprint.
When you found the footprints, what did you think right away when you sort of noticed that?
I looked at the footprint and thought, that's a big foot. That is a bigger print than my foot.
Literally a big foot.
Literally a big foot. And I was just standing there looking at it for like, I felt like minutes were just going by. I'm just thinking this is huge. And I looked and noticed there's more of them. And then I look around and there's more than just the trail I was at. There was another trail to my left, another one to my right. There was just multiple trails going. And then I came back and I had taken the picture, and I came back and I grabbed my buddy. I'm like, hey, come check this out. So we both go out there, and he brought the dog that had the caribou foot. And we go out there and I show him, and he's like, what the hell? And then the dog just kind of starts following the trail. So we follow the dog, and the dog leads us to a tree, and at the bottom of the tree was a bunch of hair and blood that belonged to a caribou.
So it was caribou hair. And what did you notice anything about like the tracks? Was there any kind of stride or anything like that, or what formation kind of, how are they going, the tracks?
Very human-like. Like if I was walking like this almost.
Okay.
Like long strides. I had to bend very low like this to like kind of keep up with stride with this thing.
Interesting.
And all the other trails were very similar in that stride and stuff.
And it was all in what is this called?
Moss and lichens.
Moss and lichens. There wasn't any snow or anything else that you saw?
No, it was all moss and lichen.
Okay.
Cold enough where like an indent it'll stay for a little bit.
What do you think, Norm?
I think we should check it out.
I like that. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, I mean, if you want to lead the way.
Like around this area right here, and when I brought my buddy back out, the dog kind of started going that way.
Behind Norm.
Yeah.
And that's where the tracks were headed.
Yeah, the trail that we followed, another set of tracks was going out past Luca there, and then another one was kind of going that way a little bit. And some of them were right next to each other and then splintered off in other directions.
Right on. And then I guess just take us to the tree where you found the what was left of the caribou.
Yeah.
So was it just blood and hair here, or were there actually any bones or any?
It was just blood and hair. Like
okay.
we walked up, we saw the hair, and deeper inspection. When we got close, we could see like traces of blood and stuff around.
Okay. Interesting. I mean, it's been almost probably a month since then, huh? So
it was 19th, it's the 14th, so almost exactly a month.
This kind of stuff doesn't last very long.
I'm pretty sure it's this one because I remember looking, and the dog was going straight that way down this like straight line.
I can't see much anything here. So did you guys follow it any further from here?
After we found the blood, we kind of walked a little further in that way because that's where the dog went, was like straight that way.
Right.
And then after that, my buddy decided, yeah, let's go back. And I'm like, that's a good idea.
Well, I mean, I'm down to keep going that way if you want.
Boardwalk that we passed.
Yeah, to those old towers.
Yeah, Grizzly got a calf there just a couple of weeks ago.
Wow. Yeah, I remember that.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So let's try to go
moose calf or
moose calf.
Yeah.
And in the subdivision on the road you stayed at last, just about 3 days ago, a yearling showed up dead right next to the road with what was described as a bite taken out of it. Which would have been interesting to see that.
Yeah.
They hauled it to one of the gravel pits, which I've got stories about that spot too.
The gravel pit, yeah.
I'd be kind of interested in just circling for a bit, see if we find anything.
Sure. Yeah.
But typically, with the road right there, I suspect if it wasn't nighttime, they probably just hauled it out of here. One place I could see as a potential end point is there is a hill off the end of the turnaround, maybe another quarter mile. I found stuff on top of hills before. It seems to be a place where they feel maybe a little safer to sit down and have their meal.
That forest right there, I mean, who goes over there, right?
Oh, yeah, those woods.
You know any hunters who go there?
Pardon?
Any hunters or anything that would go down there?
Yeah, but that's very much late August, September sort of.
I have to peak moose. What other motivation would you have to really go down there, right?
Oh yeah. We want to be careful we don't confuse the moose track though. But that's
kind of intriguing.
It is interesting. Look at that size.
Yeah.
That's what, 15 inches or so right there? I forgot the tape measure in the truck.
Want to put my foot next to it?
Sure.
I got a big foot.
Yeah, I think I'll do this. I can test out this 3D scan thing. Let's see. That's gonna start uploading, and we'll see how it looks. We'll see if it looks any good. I mean, keep you posted. We didn't find much in the area aside from a few ambiguous tracks, so we made our way back towards the road, where Norm shared a story of a missing person case from just last year, right after my last visit to the area. Do you mind telling us a little bit about that?
No, I don't mind at all. That was Mary Dawn Wilson. She was, as I recall, about 62, somewhere in there. She was traveling in a vehicle with a child of a friend of hers. She wasn't the grandmother, as sometimes is reported. She got about 1.25 miles down the Stampede Road east from where we're standing now. The story is that she got stuck in the mud and that she then left the vehicle apparently to try to get help. She unfortunately walked away from help. Apparently, she headed in this direction. She left the child locked in the car, and she walked to within about 1/4 mile of us that way, where they found clothing items, unspecified, in the roadway. And the Alaska State Troopers who investigated said there was no sign of foul play or animal attack. The Alaska State Troopers just kind of put their hands up in the air. They don't know what happened. There was a massive search. It involved helicopters, fixed-wing aircraft, four-wheelers, people on foot, drones. I volunteered myself and I circled 8 Mile Lake, which is down there, thinking, well, maybe she saw that cabin down there and headed that way. But I think it had been well covered before I was looking. Just about a year ago today is when she disappeared. No sign whatsoever of what happened to her. She just vanished. And then John here finds interesting tracks right here, which I don't want to think Sasquatch had anything to do with it, but we're kind of out of ideas.
It's weird. I mean, I didn't know she was in her 60s. I mean, this is physically challenging for us to get through, young guys, and I mean, imagine someone and what kind of mental state she had to have been in for that whole incident to take place. That's very strange.
Yeah, if you can imagine just getting 1/2 mile through this stuff.
Not easy.
Somebody that age, it was hard to explain how she could have gotten far enough to not be found. It's also hard to explain why she left clothing items behind. And I've never been able to find out what those clothing items were. I suspect they might have included shoes, but I don't know.
And that's the most recent sort of kind of high-profile missing case in this area?
In this area, yeah. I haven't heard of any others, actually, in this area lately. People get lost in the park fairly often.
Sure, yeah. I mean, even getting to like a mountain just right over there, that's a haul.
Yeah, yeah, that's 3-4 hours to get to the top of that for somebody in shape.
Yeah.
And I don't know why she'd head that way.
It's weird. I mean, Alaska, a lot of people just kind of go missing, truly. It's, I don't know what to make of it, but yeah, I don't know if it's just more in Alaska than other places, or it's just kind of a perfect storm of different things.
There's perhaps more opportunity here because there's so much wilderness area, and there are some predators, but it's a little odd.
And of course, you know, can't be understated how relatively close we are to where the whole Chris McCandless saga happened as well. So this area, does this road have kind of a notoriety because of that? I mean, people come to sort of, it's like a pilgrimage.
It is. In fact, I used to call them the pilgrims. They don't do it so much now that the bus has been moved.
Right.
I think some people still want to get out to where the bus was. But yeah, you used to be able to, at the turnaround, you'd find hiking gear there. People would come back, they bought bear spray, trekking poles, etc. And they would just leave them there because they didn't need them anymore. That's all they came to Alaska to do, is try to get to the bus.
Yeah, wow.
And yeah, occasionally people would get into trouble and there'd have to be SARS events going out there. And the locals found that frustrating.
Yeah. Well, I don't blame them.
They were mostly very nice people, a lot of Europeans.
Sure, that's what I heard. It was a couple of the people that have, well, at least one of them was maybe an Italian or something that had passed away out there.
Yeah, no, a French woman.
French woman.
Definitely did. You can find at the Savage River a marker there. For one of the people that died, they actually died in the tech, but they got to the Savage and they decided, that's far enough.
Yeah, right. Wow. The following morning, as we left the Healy area, Mount Denali hid itself in the clouds, leaving us guessing as to where it could be. We were headed further south, towards the Talkeetna mountain range and the Matsu Valley, north of Anchorage. While we had exclusively been using the road system so far, most of Alaska cannot be reached by automobile. In fact, the areas connected by any sort of vehicle routes are very tiny compared to the landmass that is Alaska. Thus, getting around via small bush plane is quite common in Alaska, especially for some small out-of-the-way villages scattered throughout the interior, such as the one mentioned in the Eyeshade People story by Chuk earlier. For this reason, I had planned to try and use a bush plane to get out to a remote location towards Denali National Park in order to camp and explore for a day or two. I found a pilot named Matt, who happened to be a fan of Small Town Monsters' work, who agreed to such an undertaking. Unfortunately, this particular summer was very bad weather-wise, so we had to cancel the plans multiple times. All we managed to do was get in the air for a short recon flight to see how the conditions might be, but alas, it was not in the cards. With the bush plane idea being unsuccessful, I turned my focus to another area we had previously visited last year. While not exactly deep into the interior of Alaska, the area around Willow Creek and Hatcher Pass sits right at the start of the Talkeetna mountain range, which pushes towards Denali and other areas further into Alaska. Last year, Rob Roy Menzies helped us showcase this area, which has a long history of Bigfoot stories, as Rob Roy has been taking stories and visiting the area for a number of years. This year we explored the area for a little bit, but overall it was pretty quiet. Hear something?
What'd you hear?
Nah. Probably nothing. Nothing major.
What does it sound like?
Nah, it's probably just me here in the creek.
Oh, okay.
I visited on a separate occasion along with Chuk, but the visibility was non-existent. As we begin to wrap up this video, there is a follow-up on something from last year I'd like to share.
While we were here last time, we visited a local store in Willow, where we were shown an interesting alleged Sasquatch footprint from the area. At the time, we could not take pictures or video of the track, so we drew the footprint to the best of our ability. A few months after that original video came out in June of last year, I received an email from somebody who claimed to know the original owner of the footprint. They sent along a host of pictures they had taken from 2010, a year or two after the cast had been made. The email read as such, quote, "The story goes that after 2 weeks of rain, a property owner was checking out his perimeter and found this print like it was brand new in the mud." End quote. The emailer indicated they had a size 10 woman's shoe. I guess our memory-based drawings weren't too bad after all. I shared the photos with Dr. Jeff Meldrum, who raised some concerns about the anatomy of the alleged foot. Being one of the most foremost authorities on human and primate foot morphology, with arguably one of the largest collections of alleged Sasquatch footprints in North America, I take what Jeff has to say seriously about these sorts of things. He mentioned the toes looking peculiar, as if constructed by hand, as well as the foot having more of a human-like arch foot shape, not typical with supposed Sasquatch footprints. Overall, he felt the footprint was dubious at best, likely a creative hoax perhaps. Whatever the truth behind this footprint is, at least it's a little bit of closure from last year's trip. So there you have it, some tales from interior Alaska. Looking back on it, there were certainly things I would have done differently, and attempted to get even further into the bush, to areas not accessible by car. But alas, with such a large area of rugged wilderness that dwarfs most other states by size alone, interior Alaska is not easy to venture into. Stay tuned for other upcoming Beyond the Trail films. There will be one more Alaskan film, this time covering the Kenai Peninsula, which is home to places like Port Chatham, Area A, and more. From there, the focus will be on British Columbia, the land of the Sasquatch, and indeed its origins.